I'm gonna do something a bit uncharacteristic as of late, and instead of keeping on leaning into everything else in our reality as it is, I'm instead gonna try to have fun, turn off part of my brain, and just try to be in the moment. Everybody needs a kind of reset and refresher, I feel, and so that's what I'm gonna try to do here with MrBallen. By the way, Discord, it's a thing. Link in the description box down below. If the link doesn't work, let me know. I'll put it in the comment section. MrBallen, you can't outrun the Midnight Man. Why does this sound so familiar? Well, anyway, that being said, I'm going to pre-like it because, well, I like MrBallen. He's a fellow combat veteran. We've served in a lot of the same places and unknowingly side by side in the same places, which is quite funny to me. That being said, please make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe. All right, let's jump into it and chive.
Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. And today, I'm going to share 3 stories that demonstrate that. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please offer to house sit for the like button. But while you're there, make sure you glue all their kitchen cabinets shut. Also,
Uh-oh. Something got him in the neck. That's not good. Is this addressed? Well, that being said, hopefully he's okay. That does look somewhat serious. It looks like it actually penetrated the skin, whatever it was, and he's healing from it. But anyway, I guess we're ignoring that. Let's continue.
Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads.
Already done.
Okay, let's get into today's stories.
Oh boy, a new technology, huh?
One day in 1785, a woman writhed in pain in a hospital bed at the Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh, which was one of the largest and most advanced hospitals in Scotland at the time. Now, despite this hospital being enormous, the room this woman was in was very small, and it was very stark too. The walls were blank, the floors were blank, there was just a single window to the outside. In fact, the only furniture in this room was the metal bed that she was lying on. And this woman, as she was laying on this bed, she was gripping the bed frame and she was sweating profusely and she was shrieking in pain like her body was being ripped in half. And
It sounds like the birth of my son, honestly. um, my ex, she tried. She really did, but unfortunately, they had to resort to external means in order to help with delivery, and that's what it sounds like. Is it sounds like someone who is giving birth, and oh boy, was it tough on both of us. We were up for so many hours. I was running up and down floors, getting food and snacks if necessary, while we were in the pre-delivery stages, and it wasn't my first birth, right? I mean, I was there for the majority of my nieces and nephews before everything went sour with my family, and I assisted with that as well. But this was my first child that survived. Um, and man, oh man, she was going through it physically. I was going through it emotionally and mentally and physically. I don't know how else to describe it except there's a strong amount of connection in between, a couple having the birth of their child and they're sharing it together. It's a very powerful, strong bond there. Yeah, it's temporary, but it's another experience entirely. But yeah, and she did her best, but we had to have external help. I could only imagine how it was way back in the day without, anesthesia or the or what's it called? Damn, I forget the name of it now. It's what they're able to give to pregnant women to ease the pain and then allow for them to relax. I forgot the name of that thing now. Was it was it suppository or about? Well, anyway, I forgot the name of it. I'm blanking at the moment. But she had to have that, and then they had to use clamps. So yeah, which was very scary to me. I was like, "Oh no, his head." Um, but yeah, but at the end of it all, my son was born. I was very happy at that moment. I really was. It's one of the very extremely few very happy moments I have in my whole life. Was the birth of my son. But anyway, that's what this sounds like and reminds me of how he's describing it.
Surrounding her on all sides were all these nurses sort of anxiously watching her to see what was going to happen next. This woman was in labor, and she'd been in labor for several hours, and so far, it was not going well. So giving birth in the 18th century looked a whole lot different than giving birth today.
Oh, I thought it might have been something else, but it sounded like, oh, okay. Well, I hit that on the head, didn't I? Oh, shit. Oh, well, you know for a fact I didn't pray watch, so let's go. Holy damn.
Primarily because there really was very limited pain management tools at doctors and nurses' disposal. I mean, there were no epidurals. They basically had
Epidural, that's what she got. She got an epidural. It was a necessity. Because she tried and tried and tried, and then at the end, she was so tired she couldn't barely move. She could barely move her arms around. She had been going at it for hours. So finally, we made the decision. All right, because she wanted to do it all natural if she could. Turned out she couldn't, but she tried. So that got us a good amount of the way, and then she'd have an epidural and clamps. So yeah, that's what that was. All right.
opium they could just give to the women, along with maybe some alcohol. That was it. Also, giving birth in the 18th century was far more dangerous to the mother than it is today. I mean, today, it's practically unheard of, at least in the UK, for mothers to die giving birth. It's something like 13 out of every 100,000 mothers dies during childbirth, so like 0.01% of people. But in the 18th century, it was like 30 times higher. Basically, women died at a fairly regular clip delivering babies. The reason for this was partly just because of bad sanitation. Back in the 18th century, it wasn't uncommon for doctors and nurses to not even wash their hands between patients. And so naturally, the spread of disease and bacteria was much higher. And then also, when it came to just complications, there just weren't that many available solutions.
Thank God for soap and hygiene, really. Seriously. That was a giant leap forward for humanity, was cleanliness. Um, it could be argued that soap is one of the absolute most important inventions of all time. Not just because you're nice and clean and you smell good and you don't smell like a pure animal all the time, but also because of the fact that it increased our propagation about 100-fold, because you could clean wounds, you could clean hands with which to treat wounds, you could reduce the spread of disease and transmission, and on top of that, right, you could reduce common diseases that could end up fatal, infections and all of that. People really, truly, I mean, today, they don't truly actually appreciate this. And there's those of us who have had to be out there in the world, um, with limited availability of soap, right? Although I always got into the habit of taking, if I couldn't bring like bar soap, like just regular raw, like I forget if it's called McKinley's or some type of just soap, no fragrance, nothing, just good old fashioned, kills germs and bacteria soap. Um, with which to keep clean, especially on super long missions. And I'd bring like, a rag. And then, of course, if I had extra water to spare, that's what I would use. Um, or if we were near water sources at any point, which is very rare up there. And especially in Iraq. But anyway, or antiseptics of some kind, or some kind of rubbing alcohol like 90% or something, with which to keep as clean as possible. And what I do is we get these big towelettes, disposable or non-disposable, it didn't matter to me. Whatever I could do to add to my hygiene kit is what we called it in the military. And MrBallen definitely used this type of shit too. Whatever I could add to my hygiene kit to keep clean, to disinfect, antiseptics and all that, soap, everything, I packed it full. And I never went anywhere without a hygiene kit. Just like having an IFAC, which is like an emergency medical kit, for those unfamiliar. But anyway, yeah, just soap alone by itself does a lot of heavy lifting for the human race, or at least for those of us who maximize its use and potential, because I know there's some dirty birds out there. I've had to be the leader of a few. Shower parties. That's just what I'll say there. Let's continue.
And so when this woman showed up at this hospital after her water broke, I mean, naturally, she was terrified. I mean, she obviously knew she had to come here and deliver this child. It was inevitable, but she knew the risks. And so here she is, she's terrified. But quickly, the staff, they took her in, they got her to this room, they laid her down, and it just sort of seemed like everything was sort of normal. Like they do this all the time. Yes, it's a risky and dangerous thing, but it just sort of seemed like her delivery was going to be fairly normal. And so for a couple of hours, she's laying in this bed, the nurses are checking on her, everything's fine. And then at some point, she begins to feel contractions. And so at this point, the staff is in the room with her and they start encouraging her to push. And so she's pushing and she's pushing, but she's not progressing. And eventually, after an examination, the staff determines that her baby's skull is so big that the baby is not able to exit her body. The baby is stuck in her birth canal. And so by 18th century delivery standards, this is a huge emergency. This is a major complication. And so the mother and the baby's lives are now in danger. So if this happened today, this woman would just be given an emergency C-section, and very likely she and the baby would be fine. Now, back in 1785, C-sections did exist, but they were extremely dangerous to the mother. It was basically a death sentence for the mother. And so they were only used if there really was no other option, and basically the mother was going to die anyways.
So, gotta shout out to the traditional women. And I mean that strictly. Traditional women. Strictly so. This is for them. Thank you for your service. People forget that thousands of women died in order for their children to live. Hell, most likely millions over history until things improved. millions of women most certainly died so that their child could survive. Now, those are women. Those are real women. Like I said, strictly for the traditional women. Thank you for your service to all of humanity. Because it is thanks to their efforts, their suffering and sacrifice, that we got this far as humans in part. The other part was the men who provided, kept safe, and provisioned for these women to do so. So again, strictly for the traditional women of the whole of humanity, thank you for your service.
And so naturally, the staff did not want to go to C-section at this point. And, you know, the mother laying there, certainly does not want to go to a C-section. And so she's screaming in agony. You know, she's not progressing. It's like complete chaos in this room. And at some point, one of the nurses senses like, okay, we need to do something here. And so she left the room. And a couple of minutes later, she came back with this gray-haired surgeon. And he walks over and he surveys this mad scene of screaming and yelling, and there's bodily fluids everywhere. I mean, it's absolute madness. And he looks at the mom and he just says, everything's gonna be fine, okay? Your pain, this miserable situation you're in, it's gonna be over in a second. And most importantly, you and your baby are gonna be just fine because I have a brand new piece of technology that's gonna save your lives. Dr. John Aitken was one of the leading doctors at this hospital.
The name sounds familiar. It's been a while since I did any type of, extracurricular medical stuff. His name sounds familiar, though. Don't tell me they're going to talk about anesthesia. Is it anesthesia or is it something else? Damn, his name is ringing a bell. I just can't remember for what. Let's continue.
And in fact, he was a pioneer in the field of childbirth at the time. And one of the things he really focused on was finding ways to make giving birth not only less painful for the mothers, but also less dangerous, to lower the fatality rate. And recently, he had developed himself a new piece of technology specifically for the emergency that this woman was having when the baby got stuck in the birth canal. He had come up with it, and now here was his chance to put it to use.
Man, it just terrifies me hearing about this because my son was head first. That's why earlier I was saying I was, scared. Oh my God, his head, and what if he suffocates and just, I was very scared in those moments. And then when he didn't cry very much at all, we were scared afterwards because of that too. But it just turned out he was a very quiet baby. So thank everything for that. But yeah, that was terrifying. I could not imagine not having just the convenience of medical technology and advancement we have now, because that would have been an absolute nightmare. God, man, that would have been horrible.
And so when he kind of explained this piece of technology to this totally distraught woman who can barely focus, all she really heard was, it's gonna be okay. I'm gonna get rid of your pain. Your baby's gonna be good. You're gonna be good. And she's relieved and she's like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then Dr. John Aitken, he leaves the room, and when he comes back, he's now carrying this instrument. And suddenly the woman, when she sees the instrument, she goes from being relieved to being downright horrified. at the idea that that is going to be used on her. But even though she began to panic and literally tried to leave the bed to get away from this doctor and this crazy barbaric looking tool, the staff literally held her down, basically strapped her to the bed, and then Dr. John Aitken said, okay, here we go, and he turns on this instrument, and this woman, she's already in blinding pain. She can't believe she's experiencing this much pain. But when he begins to apply this instrument to her body, the pain somehow becomes even worse. It's like she begins having this out-of-body experience. The pain is so intense. And then suddenly, when it feels like it literally can't get any worse than this, that she must be dying, it all kind of fades for a second, and she hears the sound that she did not expect to hear. It was the sound of a baby crying. Her baby had just been successfully extracted from her stomach. Her baby was okay. And amazingly, she was okay too. Dr. John Aitken had been right. This instrument, despite how horrifying it was, really worked. And it literally did save her and her baby's lives. So the procedure that this woman underwent was known as a symphysiotomy. And the procedure itself had been around since, the 17th century. This was a procedure used when a baby got stuck in the birth canal. And the way this procedure worked is they would go in and sever the joint called the pubic symphysis, which connects the left and right pelvis bones. So imagine, right in the middle of your crotch, them going in there and cutting through this big, thick joint to basically open up your birth canal. I mean, this is a highly invasive and excruciatingly painful procedure. That is, until Dr. John Aitken invented this new piece of technology, the thing he just used on this woman to save her and her baby's lives.
Oh, man. I don't know why, but certain medical things make me squeamish. Now I've shot people in the face. I've shot people's faces off. Yes, you heard me say that right. Weapon, face, boom, boom. Barely any face left. Right? I have mangled people. I've hit people with, mark. You name the mark, I've done it to people. Right? I'm a combat veteran. I've watched friends die in front of me. Had friends killed in front of me, right? Dying and then being killed, or the difference is the time. When you're killed, it's one and it's just over with. When you're dying, it takes a while. Right? And then I've done the same to my enemies, to the enemies of my country. And I have torn them limb from limb, blown them apart, and amongst quite a few other things, very personally as well. But for some reason, medical stuff, some of it still makes me squeamish. And I've never been able to figure out why. Not really. But, God almighty, this sounds like one of the worst tortures possible. Even though I know that they've done the comparison between, a guy getting kicked in the nuts versus a woman giving birth and it going normally or nicely. And the man is in more pain than the woman is, or supposedly the science says. But still. Ugh. Anyway, let's continue.
This piece of technology made the symphysiotomy basically more targeted and more efficient. So it's still totally invasive and painful and awful, but smaller incision, much faster, and a higher success rate. And so despite the fact that Aitken's invention sort of looked really barbaric, it caught on very quickly and sort of became the standard for how these symphysiotomies were done. They used this tool. And it would remain that way until about the turn of the 20th century, which is when C-sections became much safer, which meant the need for symphysiotomies decreased dramatically, which meant this tool was sort of no longer needed in hospitals. And so basically this tool sort of faded into obscurity until another group, completely unrelated to medicine, found a very specific use for this instrument. And that group were lumberjacks. They found that this tool, which had previously been used to cut open women's bodies and sever these large joints, was also really good at cutting down trees. The device that Dr. John Aitkins invented for medicine was actually just a chainsaw.
I don't imagine recovery was possible. Oh, fuck. Right. Now okay, so I've studied some medical things, right? And that was only for the furthering of my capacity, in the military. And then later on, I just finished some of it up as a retired veteran, just to see if I can get work with it. Turns out I can't. No opportunities for me, it seems. And I am happy. We have so many other ways to do things rather than this. But yeah, I have no idea if it was even possible to do recovery. Because as far as I'm aware of anatomy and physiology, once you cut through that, it's kind of hard to come back. Oh. I'm still terrified of surgery, even though I've broken my back 3 times now. I just keep coming back, thankfully. But I refuse surgery just for the fact it terrifies me more than getting shot. Or blown up. Or stabbed. Yeah, surgery and stuff like that terrifies me a lot more than having horrible shit happen to me. How screwed up is that?
Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. After I didn't say created it, and it's a trained therapist to get 10% off.
As far as I've looked into, BetterHelp has not gotten better, and they still hire just willy-nilly whoever. Yeah, they're still not doing good according to everything I've looked into. And according to some people I know, and am acquainted with who have tried it, and they've had horrible freaking experiences. So, yeah, I'm guessing he had a good experience with it, and that's why he does that, but the rest of it doesn't look good. Thus, I'm skipping the ad for this one. Apologies to any who cares or doesn't care.
Off your first month of therapy.
The Midnight Man, it reminds me of a book I read I really enjoyed called The Midnight Mayor. Great books. They're based around a character named Matthew Swift. And the start of the series is called The Return of Matthew Swift. It's an amazing book series. I greatly enjoyed it. I still reread it every once in a while, alongside stuff like 1984 or historical books or scientific books of any kind, or scientific fiction like The Sixth Extinction. But yeah, that's what this title reminds me of. Just FYI.
One night in the summer of 1904, a young woman named Anna Gray was laying in her bed in her second-story room in a bed and breakfast in Chicago, Illinois. Except she couldn't sleep. She couldn't really tell why she couldn't sleep, but her stomach was kind of upset from the mince pie she had eaten earlier, and it was kind of, her stomach was rumbling around, and so maybe that was why. And also, the air in the room was very stuffy, there wasn't any circulation, and so she's just laying in silence as her stomach is growling, and it was very uncomfortable. And so eventually, Anna felt so frustrated that she was not able to sleep that finally she just threw the covers off, hopped out of her bed, and walked over to the window, and she opened it up to let in some fresh air. And even though, her stomach still felt pretty upset, having the fresh air hit her and sort of circulate through the room did, even if it was just by a small percentage, make her feel a little bit better. And now that she was standing up near the window and Sort of realizing how late it was, she suddenly did feel sort of tired. And she was like, great, I'll leave the window open and I'll go back to sleep. So she walked back to her bed, laid down, pulled the covers up over her, and sure enough, just a couple of minutes later, she had fallen asleep.
I wonder what she invited in, or who she invited in. Now I know air circulation was usually just a natural way back in the day. Or the few places that used, I forget what it's called. It's where you have vents that go under the ground and then, they pass through the bottom of the building, and then they had like porous floors for that. I forget what that effect is called. Some places still use it today. It's still very effective, no matter where you are, really. But yeah, just man, having good circulation of air, amazing thing. You would have thought we would have known forever ago, but it turns out it took us a long time to figure that one out, didn't it? But at the same time, I can't help but feel okay. Open window, doesn't matter the floor. Some people can climb like freaks, no matter the time or place that we're speaking of. Some people can just climb anything. This sounds like either some kind of night terror, or what's it called? What's it called when people experience the shadow people or whatever? Um, oh, what's it called? Sleep paralysis? I think that's what it's called. I feel like this might be one of those. I guess we'll find out. I got to stop rambling.
But several hours later, Anna suddenly woke up. She's laying in her bed, her eyes shoot open, and for a second as she's laying there, she can't quite remember where she is. She's confused, disoriented, and then she remembers, oh yeah, I'm in that bed and breakfast, I'm in Chicago, okay, I'm going home tomorrow, okay. But as she's laying there, sort of putting together what's happening, she just has this weird feeling that something just feels off in the room. She can't quite place it, but there's something wrong here. And so instinctively, Anna sits up in her bed. And she kind of just surveys this small room that she's in. And at first, everything seems totally in order. There's nothing odd here at all. It's just a late night inside of a bed and breakfast. It's still, it's quiet. There's nothing going on here. But then as she scans the room one more time, her eyes stop on the open window. Because
Is it sleep paralysis or is it an intruder? Hell, it could be both. I'm hyper vigilant. I keep weapons near me in my sleep. I've got multiple different methods of security applied no matter anywhere or everywhere I go. Hyper vigilant, I don't think barely covers it. Open window. Sends my spidey senses a tingling.
now there is a man sitting on the windowsill, looking into the room right at her, unflinching, just staring right at her. And Anna, in an instant, is looking at the sky and a million thoughts go through her head. She's thinking, oh my God, he's here to hurt me. He must have climbed up and he's about to come in here and attack me. Like, what's going on here? She doesn't know if she's dreaming. She's just completely panicked. And unlike a lot of people who in this situation might freeze completely or scream and try to hide or run away, Anna's fight or flight response was to fight. And so it was almost like in a fraction of a second, she had leapt out of the bed to confront this man, this stranger in her room. But the man, as soon as she jumped up, he didn't budge. He's just sitting there staring at her. And then almost like delicately, he leaned backwards and fell out the window. And now Anna's thinking, oh my God, is he okay? She doesn't know who he is, but that's a serious fall. They're on the second floor. And so she runs to the window.
You know what this sounds like? Sounds like someone from a circus doing a circus performers act just to scare people and get kicks out of it. That's what I swear to God. Right, I'm sure people have heard of people like Houdini Or who's another guy? He was a filmmaker from way back in the day. He did a lot of stunts. He was called like the. He was called like the. It was like the Invincible Man or something. Count Dankula did a video on him. I forget his name. But he did all sorts of wacky, amazing, and insane things. You know, as part of his filmmaking and entertainment career. And the dude, you know, like, that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like someone who's some kind of circus performer or acrobat of some kind. Just climbed up, waited for someone to wake up, you know, was like, let's see what your reaction is. They get confronted and they're like, aha, nice. And they just leave. Nonchalant. It's amazing what people that, what gymnasts can do nowadays, but they've always been able to do that for the longest time. But anyway, let's continue. That's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like some circus performer, you know, olden times gymnast or acrobat of some kind who, you know, played a prank on somebody. Not quite harmless because the poor woman was scared almost to death and then felt like she had to fight. But yeah, and then I got to also address the duality of woman. What are you doing? Why are you here? And now, oh my God, are you okay? The neuroticism knows no bounds, I swear. Although, to be fair, in the moment, you know, flipping that switch must be something else. But yeah.
Window, looking out, expecting to see this guy, you know, with a broken neck down on the ground, but she looks down and there's nobody there. You know, the window's wide open, you know, she left it open before, and so she's kind of looking around to make sure, did he really fall out the window? Did he come into the room? But no, she's all alone in her room. And so she's looking down to see if maybe he kind of, you know, ran up against the side of the house and maybe he's gonna show himself, but there's nobody. And then at some point she notices there's this long, dark car that's parked out on the street underneath the streetlight. And she couldn't remember if that car had been parked there the whole time. It seemed sort of out of place, but she just couldn't remember. And so she's looking at this vehicle and she realizes there's somebody in the car. And as she's staring at the car, the driver begins to move. They sort of position their bodies down low and they look up at Anna, and Anna realizes it's the same guy who was just sitting in her windowsill and fell out the window a second ago. He's in this car. And so Anna, she's just frozen looking at this guy, wondering how could this be happening? Is this a nightmare? Is this real? She doesn't know. But as she's looking, this guy who's looking up at her, he extends his hand out the driver's side window and begins beckoning to Anna, telling her to come down and get in the car with him. And so Anna, she's seeing this and she's also realizing the car he is in is a hearse. And so she is just beyond terrified, and instinctively she just jumps back, slams the window, and sort of just pretends like this can't be happening, like this is not real. But then after
Okay, that went from possibly a prank and a harmful one to possibly a harmful criminal act. I mean, if this is something paranormal, and it's not just humans messing with other humans, that's quite the lengths and level to go to. Holy shit, dude.
For a couple of seconds, she's thinking, I gotta make sure I know where this guy is, where he's gonna go next. And so she goes right back to the window to see what he's doing. But now the hearse, the man, they're gone. And so Anna remained at this window for quite a while, just looking out the window, just making sure this guy really was gone. Because again, she just doesn't know, like, was this real? Am I imagining things? Am I going crazy? Was this a nightmare? Like, she doesn't know. And so she's just standing there waiting, watching, but you know, this guy doesn't reappear, the hearse doesn't reappear. And so eventually she crawls back in bed, and after what felt like forever, she drifted off into a fairly light sleep. And then before long, you know, she opened her eyes again and sunlight had filled the room. She had survived the night. And so now, you know, feeling the comfort and safety of light in the room and knowing that it's a new day, she told herself, wow, like, That was crazy. That was terrifying. That had to have been just a particularly vivid nightmare. Like, there's no other reasonable explanation for this. It had to be a nightmare. So Anna got out of bed, convinced she was just fine, that nothing strange has happened here at all. She got herself together and she left the bed and breakfast, and she headed out to this brand new department store that had just opened up in Chicago. She wanted to go and have a nice day of shopping. And so Anna gets to this department store, and it's so vibrant and it's bustling with people, and there's 4 floors of all this incredible stuff that they're selling. And for the next several hours, Anna just has a great time walking all around, picking out things she likes, and just basically enjoying shopping. And then eventually, when she was up on the 4th floor, after she had purchased all the things she was gonna buy, she decided it was time to leave. Now, by this point, she had basically completely forgotten about whatever happened the night before. The sky, the hearse, all of it. It was completely out of her mind. She is back to normal. And so she makes her way over to the elevator to go down to the 1st floor. And so she hits the button, and she's waiting and waiting. And then eventually she hears a noise, a dinging sound, and the doors open up. And there's loads of people on this elevator car. It is packed. And so, like most of us would do in this situation, Anna kind of waved them off and said, I'll take the next one. And she's expecting that, the doors will close and these folks will go down, and, when it comes back up, she'll get on, and that's that. This is like not a big deal at all. She's not even thinking about it. Just go ahead. But the doors don't close. And instead, as she's kind of, not really looking over in their direction, she hears this voice come out of the elevator car. And it's this kind of rude tone. It's a man's voice, and he calls out, "One more," like demanding that Anna get in there. Like, what are you doing? You're holding up the car. And Anna was kind of taken aback by whoever was kind of barking this order at her. And she turned around and she looked into the elevator car, and she couldn't really tell where the voice was coming from. But then eventually she noticed it was coming from the guy who operated the elevator car. The elevator was manual. There was somebody who literally moved the car up and down, and she kind of didn't see the guy's face at first, but eventually, when the guy kind of poked his head through and looked at her, confirming that, yeah, I'm talking to you, get in the car.
No. Don't tell me it's the dude from last night. No, 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 no. Don't tell me it's the guy from last night. No, it couldn't be. You gotta be one clever. Goddamn, you gotta be amazingly genius to pull something like this off. And if it's paranormal, well, that's even worse, isn't it?
She realized the elevator car operator was the man in the hearse that she had seen in her windowsill. It was the same guy. And so Anna is so horrified, she gasped out loud and just was like, no, I'm not going in there, no. And so all the folks that are in the elevator car, they do not know what's going on. And they're kind of looking around like, what's happening here? And the car operator continues to look out at Anna for a second. Then he just kind of scoffs at her like, fine. Then the doors close and the elevator disappears. And for a moment, Anna's telling herself, like, what is going on? That can't be the same guy. It's just gonna be a coincidence, right? But as she's having these thoughts, these crazy thoughts, trying to rationalize something that's not rational, she suddenly heard this loud, metallic, crunching sound inside of the elevator shaft, followed by what was obviously people screaming. It would turn out that elevator car that she nearly got into, but didn't because of her fear of this guy that she was seeing again, the same guy from her bedroom the night before, that elevator car, as it began its descent, it malfunctioned and fell 4 stories, killing 2 people on board. Now, unfortunately, we don't really know much more about what ultimately happened with the elevator operator, if they ever confirmed without a doubt that, that guy is the same one Anna saw the night before, or if he even really was on the elevator car. Like, we don't know that. But what we do know is Anna did speak to reporters, and they did widely publish this story. And that is how we know about it.
That is goddamn insane. I mean, I've seen some really strange stuff. But more often than not, I chalk it up to something else. I try not to attribute nothing to nothing being like spirits or energy or ethereal, non whatever. Thus, I have such a struggle believing in God or gods or, in the conceptualization humans have, whereas I look at them more as like possibly real entities of a paramaterial kind, right? So kind of like how there's the fact that we know that particles wink in and out of existence. There's quantum tunneling. There's quantum what is it called? Quantum entanglement, where two particles separated by time and space can still affect each other. I lean more into stuff like that rather than like you know the the conceptualization of like the magic of the paranormal, if you know what I mean. I prefer to think of things more grounded first, and then when I run out of the capacity to keep things grounded, then I might venture into the paranormal or extra normal or whatever. But still, that is really crazy. Right? Now I can understand that there's such thing as hysteria or hysterics, which women are given too. And there's a reason why eyewitness testimony is one of the most undependable things when it comes to court cases. Because not only do people lie, deceive, cheat, steal, and all that, but also people can misremember, unremember, forget, and then draw blank on certain things because of how the brain does stuff for us that we don't control. So there's that as well. So I would personally start at some kind of hysterics. She was having episodes of this and seeing the same guy. She probably saw a face like his from somebody that traumatized her or something, and then it followed her to this one specific event on this day and night. It could have been that or something else, but still, it is really crazy how all of that lines up within the reality as well, externally from herself, where it affected the real world around her. That's pretty, I mean, if all of that is true, that is insane. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below.
On the morning of July 5th, 2008, a 50-year-old man named David File walked up to his apartment in Bishopstoke, which is a small village in southern England. So this apartment complex was massive. It took up an entire block, and it was comprised of several two-story buildings. When David moved in 8 years earlier, this apartment complex was sort of bustling and doing quite well. There were loads of tenants. It was well kept. I mean, it was a nice place to live. But now, the place was kind of fallen into disrepair. There were weeds everywhere. It was kind of dirty. There was graffiti. I mean, buildings were all boarded up. I mean, this place really had fallen on hard times, almost like it was abandoned. And in many regards, it basically was. In fact, David was literally the last tenant in the entire complex. There were a total of 72 apartments in this complex, but 71 of them were boarded up and totally abandoned. It was just this last apartment that David lived in. And on this day, as David approached his front door, he noticed there was something taped to it. It was a piece of paper. And so he walked up and he read it, and he quickly understood it was an eviction notice. They were kicking him out. And so he angrily ripped it off the door and he went inside his cramped, small apartment. There's a full-size billiard table sitting right in his living room, and everything was just tight and on top of each other. But this was David's home. He loved it here. He did not want to leave. And so he took this eviction notice and he went over to the kitchen and he just threw it on top of a pile of other papers that were mostly all from the company that owned this complex. The company was called Atlantic Housing. So part of the reason this building had really fallen on hard times here is because 2 years earlier, Atlantic Housing had decided to tear this place down. And so they had offered to help relocate all the tenants, and basically everybody else had agreed to leave and, take the assistance from Atlantic Housing, but not David. He refused to leave. And so eventually, Atlantic Housing got fed up with David because they're offering him money, they're offering him assistance. I mean, they're really trying to just get him to leave so they can move forward with their project. And so eventually, when he wouldn't budge, no matter what they offered him, They just sued him. And it took 2 years, but eventually a court ruled that, okay, Atlantic Housing, you can kick him out of your building. And so David, you're being evicted. And so David knew this was coming. He knew he was going to be evicted, but he just simply could not accept the ruling. He's looking around at his cramped little apartment that he had called home for 8 years. He just loved it here. He didn't want to leave. And so he thought to himself, you know what? They can try to evict me, but I'm not leaving. And
Man, oh man. I mean, I understand it to a degree. I mean, my house I used to have, I didn't want to leave it. I set it up for myself and my son, down the street from his mama, you know. But thanks to the increase in expenses done by Democrats on purpose to make everybody poor, and thanks to local city people doing skeezy stuff, discrimination against me when it came to employment. I lost a job because I didn't speak a foreign language. That's not even a joke. I tried to find someone to take my case for a lawsuit, but everybody said they wouldn't make enough money, so they didn't take it. And so because of that cascade failure, and, you know, I was doing what was called VR&E, to try and get into an apprenticeship program to see if I could start working again and keep myself afloat. And this was after separation from my ex. Well, I couldn't keep up anymore. I ran further and further into debt, and then finally, I had to leave. So I understand, you know, it was a good house. I loved that house. That house was great. There's some people that are old hands of the channel who remember that house. It was a good house. It was a great place to live. Central air and everything. Nice and homely. I redid the kitchen. But I couldn't sustain it. And now having such a thing is beyond my capacity forever. So I understand this man's feelings about such things. It's really painful to lose what you want as a home. But it sounds like he lives alone. So, you know, I had to make the decision that was more economically viable for myself and my son. It's still painful. But I understand it. Still, though, I mean, if I had gotten offers of assistance to move, I would have taken them. But no such thing exists for me here because discrimination. Anyway, let's stop talking so much about me. Let's continue. I feel a kinship with this guy.
so David decides he's gonna protest, but not some little protest. He's gonna do something that is so big, so extreme, that it will guarantee people will pay attention and recognize that this ruling is wrong. And David knew exactly how he was going to do that. And so later that afternoon, David made his way over to his storage closet and he pulled out some rope, an electric timer, and a power tool, and he brought these supplies over to his living room. And there, David rigged up this elaborate trap that he was designing specifically so that when Atlantic Housing or the police or whoever it was that showed up to evict him, that when they opened his door, they would have to be confronted by this trap. And for David, he felt like this was his last-ditch effort to prove once and for all that this eviction was wrong. A few hours later, 2 police officers, along with David's very worried parents, stood outside of David's apartment. Earlier that afternoon, David's parents had tried to get in touch with David and they had called him repeatedly, but he hadn't answered. And so at some point they had driven over to his apartment and they had pounded on the door and tried to get his attention, but he hadn't come to the door. However, they had heard this strange sound coming from inside the apartment. And it was unsettling enough, and considering the whole circumstance of not being able to get in touch with their son, that they decided to call the police. And so when they got there, the police, they're knocking on the door, yelling out for David, but still no answer. And the police too, they can clearly hear this strange sound, which almost sounded like a mechanical whirring sound or something. They couldn't quite place it, but there definitely was something odd happening in this apartment. And so given the fact that, there's real concern around what's going on with David, the police decide to kick in the door and see what's going on. And so they get out of the way, and one of the officers steps back and kicks the door down. And as soon as the door flies open, that loud mechanical whirring sound becomes way louder. It's so loud, and they suddenly get a complete view into the apartment, and all of them just froze and gasped.
Don't tell me this man fell victim to his own trap. And was some kind of mechanical device, a chainsaw or whatever, involved? Ah, damn it. I have a feeling that's exactly what happened.
So the trap that David had built had functioned exactly as he intended it to. Basically, the authorities were going to come in the front door and be horrified by what they saw, because this trap really was not for them as much as it was for David. He was sort of putting himself into a trap as a display of his protest that you can't pull me out of here. And now authorities have arrived and they've seen the results of this trap. What the trap was a power tool that was on, that was the mechanical whirring sound they heard, and it had been tied by David to one of the legs of his billiard table, like an arm jutting off the side of this billiard table. And then the tool had this electric timer that he had rigged to it so that when it went off, it would start the tool. And what was this tool? It was a chainsaw. And what did David do? He intentionally positioned his neck right up against the teeth of this chainsaw, set the timer, and then waited. And he basically timed it so that shortly after getting in position, the timer would go off, it would cut his head off, and then presumably authorities would look inside the apartment and see what, in David's mind, they were responsible for: his death. And sure enough, when the police and the parents looked in, they saw the trap, they heard the saw buzzing, and they saw David's severed head on the ground. Despite David's final protest really having a lot of the effect that he was hoping for, I mean, it did make headlines all over the UK. A lot of people heard about this and they were horrified by it. Despite all that, shortly after his death, the apartment complex was demolished.
Fell victim indeed. I mean, I understand it. I've been there myself. It's really hard to persist to exist when you come up empty on the list of reasons to do so. And it sounds like he was losing the only thing left he had that gave him any measure of I guess contentedness. Just like the only thing I have in my life is my son. Without him, I have no reason to exist. There's no other point in being here. I'm wanted by nobody, nothing, and no one. But damn it, man. Fell victim indeed. Freaking hell.
Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of today's episode in the comments. And remember, we have hundreds of videos for you to binge right now. But if you're looking for a recommendation from me of that one video that's worth your time, well, it's this one right here. So give it a watch. All right, until next time, see ya.
All right, there we go, folks. So, from the guy that tells the stories from the strange, dark, and mysterious himself, MrBallen, you can't outrun the Midnight Man. Damn, this was a watch. That being said, what do you think? You let me know in the comments down below. All right, you know what time it is. Be good. Be safe. Make it life for yourselves. Don't compromise safety and security for nobody and nothing. Death and disaster is only a second away. Do what you can today. And I will see y'all in the next one. I am Badger 7 Actual, the formerly homeless veteran, Blast Cap Badger, out.